Welcome to 6th grade history. This is lesson 151. We are looking at pages 300 to 305. We're stopping at just the top of that page is inequality and its consequences. And so we're looking at Cuba and the nation as a whole and just seeing some different things about it. We're going to be seeing its history and what it is facing today. So something that wanted to mention as the homework for tonight for this lesson is to study pages 293 to 300 for the quiz that's tomorrow, or in lesson 152, and to do your math skill sheet 41 C and D. So you did A and B last night, so you can do C and D tonight. And if you didn't finish some of those comprehension checkup or the chapter checkup questions, because there were quite a bit of them, then you can finish up those today. So what you have left for that, you can do, but then their quiz is tomorrow, so we want to make sure that you get all those done, because those questions you might see on the quiz. So I want you to do that. I'm just going to ask a couple questions, and then we'll jump into talking about Cuba. The two divisions of the Virgin Islands are what? So this is from yesterday. The British Virgin Islands and the United States Virgin Islands, or they were the Danish Virgin Islands before. The large island group to which the Virgin Islands, Leeward, and Windward Islands belong. The Lesser Antilles, okay? And then this is a little bit longer. This is your think question. How did the gospel come to the Virgin Islands? Well, a man from the islands met Count von Zinzendorf, who was the leader of the Moravian missionaries. And he told him, he met him in Denmark, and he said that they would be welcome on the islands if they came. And so started with 2 and more followed later, and they built mission stations all over the islands to really bring the gospel and spread the gospel. And so that's what happened. All right, so now we're going to be talking about a country that has had known very little freedom in the recent years, and they only had freedom for just a handful of years in comparison. So we're going to be seeing Cuba. It's the largest island in the West Indies, about the size of Pennsylvania, and it's only 90 miles south of Key West, Florida, and so that's the tip of Florida. Some islands down there. You've got Key Largo, Key West, and I forgot the third one. Anyway, there's 3 keys. That's the Florida Keys. So anyway, the official language is Spanish. Havana is the capital of Cuba. They are known, among other things, for the bee hummingbird, which is the smallest bird in the world. And its wingspan is about 1 inch. So if you get your ruler out, or it's about that big, that's really tiny. And so, and its nest is about this, it's half the size of it's the size of a half of a walnut shell, okay? So if you've seen a walnut, they're about that big, and so about half of that is their size of their nest, okay? So Columbus discovered this island, and he claimed it for Spain, and so they farmed the fertile land for many years, and Cuba wanted to be independent, though, and so it was one of the wealthiest colonies in the West Indies. They wanted their independence, but Spain refused, and so there were several attempts to become independent, and finally, with the help of the U.S., they won their independence after the war, the Spanish-American War in 1898, sorry. But it was a struggling young nation because it was just becoming independent, and so there was a lot of turmoil with that. There were lots of different groups that probably wanted to take control, and so just with different methods. And finally, there was a dictatorship under Fulgencio Batista, and we eventually supported him and retained a Navy base there in Guantanamo Bay. And so we did support him for the time that he was there. But in 1959, Fidel Castro, who was backed by the Soviet Union, so their communist government, he overthrew Batista's dictatorship. And he claimed that he wanted to make the people free, but he wasn't telling them the truth, and he wasn't being honest with anyone. And so as soon as he was able to overthrow their government, the government before, he established communism. He called himself first a prime minister and later a president, but he was really a dictator. And so it was awful, because anyone who didn't agree with him, there were people that got imprisoned or killed because they didn't agree with him. And so at this point, there were lots of people that fled from this island because they knew what was coming. They saw, he outwardly said that they were communist, and so they knew that communism, especially Christians and others that knew what communism did, left because they didn't want the persecution and they didn't want to deal with all of that. And so communism is they're atheists. They believe that there isn't a God, and so they suppress, they put it down. Any religion, he let people, a few churches stay open, but many people didn't go to church anymore, because if you went to church, you could lose your job or you could be persecuted in other ways. And so it was very much, it's a way of controlling the people. Another thing that they did was that they would pretty much brainwash the kids with school. That in school they would teach them to spy on their families, to spy on their parents, and report back. And many children unknowingly got their parents in trouble, and they were taught the teachings of communism, that of atheism, false ideas, and that they needed to spread communism throughout the world. That was their goal. And so they lived with this this teaching, and really they were taught all of these lies. And the freedoms that were taken away, he said that he was trying to liberate them, which means give them freedom. But the freedoms that they took away was freedom of the press. That means the newspapers and people saying, reporting the news the right way. Freedom, the right of trial by jury, which meant that if you went before a judge, he makes that decision, and you could be hanged, or you could be shot, or you could go to jail for 30 years. And so it's awful. The right to own property, to make a profit, to vote, to fair treatment and freedom from fear. And so Castro sent his leaders, he appointed the leaders, there were no more elections, and he sent them to Russia and Czechoslovakia to learn how to keep people under control in a communist state. They learned it so well that Cuba was called the Big Dark Jail. Over 5,000 people were shot to death for not accepting communism, and many more were cruelly beaten in public. And really, they had such an awful life now there in Cuba. And the prisons, there were people that were sent there, and they were called political prisoners because they disagreed with the government. And so they would be sentenced to 10, 20, 30 years. And sometimes they would end one sentence and immediately be given another sentence. And so they didn't have the right food or shelter or clothing. They had to work 70 to 80 hours a week. And they were just beaten and tortured, and it wasn't like anything that was humane at all. And so, that it really did bring the people um, down in this economy, in this setup. They also didn't have an incentive to work because they weren't paid any more for working hard. In United States, if you work hard and you do your best and you continue to get better at a job, um, you will eventually get a raise, and at some point you might get a promotion, and that with that comes an even bigger raise. And so that incentive to work hard, to do better, and even with school, that if you do your best and you study, then you're more likely to get a good grade. But the times when you don't study, and when you think, when you study just a little bit but not really, and you're just I kind of understand it, I think I'll be fine, and then you take the test and you're like, I didn't get any of that. Well, you realize that because you didn't work hard, you didn't get the grade that um, that work deserves. You did get the grade that your work deserved because that grade was reflected your lack of studying. And so that idea of working hard for something follows through in all of life. It's school, it's work outside of working hard. Maybe you have a side job or something that you do in the summer, like mowing the lawn, or something else, maybe babysitting or something. If you're not going to do your best and you do a poor job, the person isn't going to pay you as much as they probably would if you did a good job. And so you want to make sure that you are working hard, and that really is help for your testimony too. But this is the type of economy that they were in, that they didn't feel the need to work hard. There's the people in history section, the Huber Matos, and he was one of Fidel Castro's closest advisors, and he was a major in his government. But he didn't realize that Castro was what he was gonna do, and so he actually opposed him to his face after he had overtaken the government, and he was tortured and he was put in jail, and he finally got his freedom, and you're going to read about that. But he lost a lot of things because of Fidel Castro. And so that's just one person's story, one example of all the people that were in this type of government. And one of the things that they had to do was ration their food, because they didn't have as much crops that were growing because of communism. The farmland was overtaken by the communists. It wasn't privately owned anymore, and so they didn't work hard, and so they didn't grow as many crops, and so they were short on food. And so they had to give a certain amount to every family, and you could even be denied some of that, because if the communist committee didn't like someone, they had to ask for food, medical care, mail delivery, clothing, housing repairs, permission to travel to the next town. I can go to Rock Springs and no one's going to say, hey, where are you going? Why are you going? And then not let me go. I can drive over there if I need to. But that's what this communism does, that it enslaves people, and they don't have the freedom to just do what they need to do. And one of the things was also a housing shortage. They didn't have, they couldn't buy houses, and they were supposed to live in apartments owned by the government, and 2 or more families often had to live in the same small apartment, and it was so small that you probably didn't have a whole lot of room to turn around. It was just describing this just sounds like only the furniture fit in these houses or in these apartments. And so just everything that communist teaches makes people just brings people under this harsh ruling that they're not able to do what they need to do for their family, and it's just it's not a good way of life, and many people don't like it, but some are brainwashed into thinking that that's the only way that they should live, and so it's really sad how that happens. But I'm going to let you read that, pages 300 to 305, and then you're going to study pages 293 to 300 for the quiz, and do the map skill sheet 41, section C and D on there, and then you'll be done with history for today, and you'll have one more class if you're going in order, and so we'll see you in the next lesson.